When the story of this winter is written, top billing will likely go to the very cold December and January in the eastern U.S., a few big East Coast snowstorms, and one that buried Chicago in early February. But lurking in the wings was a large-scale pattern of wetness and dryness that's just now starting to have impacts. Now, this was a so-called La Nina winter, with water temperatures in the tropical central and eastern Pacific Ocean cooler than average. In La Nina winters, the southern U.S. tends to be drier than average, while the northwest to the northern plains tends to be wetter. So what actually happened? Well, here's the percent of average precipitation from December to February. Yellow, orange, and red means drier than average. Green, blue, and purple, wetter than average. And it was a very wet winter in the northern plains. These purples mean between 2 to 4 times the average. The December-January period there was one of the top 10 wettest on record. And meanwhile, with just a few exceptions, drier than average conditions dominated from the southwest into the southeast. And as a result, much of the south is now in drought. The brown and tan here on the drought monitor means severe drought, the maroon extreme drought. And notice there's some of that in Florida along the Atlantic coast. The last 6 months of 2010 was the driest such period on record in Florida, and wildfire danger there is very high right now. Here's a satellite loop from last week showing a large smoke plume from a fire that forced a section of Interstate 95 to shut down. And unless significant rains return soon, you'll be hearing a lot in the next few months about wildfires in Florida, because spring is peak wildfire season there. Meanwhile, the upper Midwest and northern plains have the opposite problem. Here's the latest snow water equivalent map for that area, the amount of water locked in the snowpack. The light blue is 2 to 4 inches. The darker blues that cover much of Minnesota and North Dakota mean 4 to as much as 10 inches of water in the snow. These values are derived partly from aircraft measurements of gamma radiation emitted by the ground. Snow absorbs some of that emission, so by comparing radiation levels with and without snow cover, you can estimate how much water is in the snow. The Weather Service's spring flooding outlook shows a very high risk for the Mississippi River from its headwaters near St. Paul all the way to St. Louis, also for several rivers in South Dakota, and for the Red River that forms the border between North Dakota and Minnesota. There's a 1 in 3 chance that the Red River in Fargo, North Dakota, will exceed the record flooding level set just 2 years ago, when it crested 23 feet above flood stage and stayed above flood stage for 62 straight days in the spring. Paul Knight has already talked about our own short-term flooding concerns. He's back with the extended forecast next.